All right, let's take people who haven't been aggrieved or aren't doing something controversial. They are simply doing good works, let's say, in an NGO, they're in a private organization, they're a political candidate, and they want to get their position in the paper. What are their options? I know op-ed piece, guest columnist, a bylined article by request or by their request or yours. Maybe a feature article on the weekend. Am I missing an opportunity?
I would say those are the big ones. I mean, these days there's all sorts of internet opportunities as well, but they sort of all roll into the same piece, which is a good piece of content, whether it's a video piece of content or a column or, you know, who knows what the next piece is going to be. I know in my job as editorial page editor, quite frequently, when you got to Friday and you needed to fill a Saturday paper, a Sunday paper, a Monday paper, and if it was a holiday weekend, a Tuesday paper, you were looking for extra columns. And these days, the budgets aren't that huge. You're looking for an extra free column. And so some of the think tanks do this really well. They get their issues out by offering 550, 600 word columns.
On a Wednesday maybe, or a
Maybe
Thursday.
on a Wednesday, maybe heading into a long weekend, they'll give a call or send an email on a Monday or Tuesday saying, I've got something coming up for the long weekend. Do you have any interest in it? It's going to be on healthcare, it's going to be on fireworks policy for Victoria Day. And generally, editorial page editors are going to look at that, look at their roster, and just do some math.
You couldn't help yourself in articulating a time hook, a fireworks story on Victoria Day, back to school in September, safe driving upon the first snowfall. So are time hooks important, or anniversaries? Is that among the best hooks?
I'd say it's almost mandatory. There has to be some reason. If it comes out of left field, people wonder why they're reading it. But you know, if something is coming, if there's a date on the calendar, absolutely target it and go for it.
The person you've used before and trust is in a better position to pitch you than a stranger?
Absolutely. Getting that first column in is always difficult, but if you can get one, generally they'll pick up the phone the next time you call.
That gigantic book, The Writer's Market, which I avoided reading most of my life, says write a query letter. Dear Mr. Granetstein, my name is, I have the following qualifications. I'd like to submit an article for the following reasons. I think it would fit into your publication for the following other reasons. Other people say just write the darn thing and submit it. What's your view?
I would write it. I would have a very short pitch that goes with it, but generally, to get the attention of an editor these days, you got one shot. So take that shot, quick little intro, why you're doing it, what you're going to say, and who you are, if you have some background that's important and valuable to this, and then I would include the piece. Because worst case scenario, you can put it on your own website. It's never wasted.
It's also hypothetical if you're pitching a thing you haven't actually written.
Yeah. You really have to deliver. That's the big thing. If you promise something, it's got to be there. And an editor will have much more confidence if they can take a quick read even through the first 100 words and say, okay, even after 100 words, I'm in. So you're good.
Now, those criteria, I think, apply pretty equally to all those entry points that we talked about, with the possible obvious exception of the tourist article from Grenoble, France on the 50th anniversary of Nancy Greene winning the gold medal or whatever. Those are a little softer kinds of things. But let's talk about the and that applies to the op-ed as well, right? Okay, the formal op-ed. Let's talk about the editorial page, which you also edited. How many editorials would you write in the course of a typical week?
Generally, I would write 3 editorials a week. We'd have 2 or 3 of us writing editorials. Obviously, at The Sun, we had 1 editorial column, so 1 a day.
How many times your old colleague Ian Harvey, I once asked him who is on the editorial board of The Sun, and he said, whoever's wearing a tie on the day when someone asks to meet with the editorial board. Was it that loose when you were there, or did the criteria tighten up a bit?
I'd say it was fairly loose with a core. The core was the editor and the senior associate editor. Those were the 2 people who ran the show. And then depending on who was coming in, what was happening, we would try to fill that editorial board with other senior editors, plus senior columnists and reporters on that beat.
How many times a week did you have someone in that you wanted to talk to? You'd invited them in?
Not all that frequently. At The Sun, because we just didn't have the staff to get it done, we would not do editorial boards as frequently as we may have even in 10 years ago.
Once every 2 weeks?
No, once a month.
Less? Oh.
But in election campaigns, as things roared forward, all of a sudden, you know, in an election campaign, we'd have 3 people in a week.
So if I were requesting a meeting with the editorial board, I'd have to have a heck of a good reason, because you habitually would only see one person a month.
Yes. Now, that's one paper. Toronto Star has people in all the time. The Globe and Mail has people in all the time. The National Post, not as much, but still fairly frequently. They have more robust editorial boards because they have more space. They have a couple editorials a day to write, and they have bigger editorial boards. So again, you got to know your audience.
Well, you mentioned, you mentioned the once a month thing, but you also mentioned the good pitch. What do I need to say to an editorial board, whether they will meet me once a month or once a week? What do I need to say to get a yes?
I think you need to have something coming up. Like, we have this big report coming out. The Ontario government is going to release it next Tuesday. We want to meet with you ahead of time. We can walk you through it, and we can also discuss it so that you're prepared. You can write editorials on it, you can write columns on it, things like that. All of a sudden, light bulbs go off and say, hey, I'm going to sound smart on this topic. Okay, yeah, you know what, we'll take that. You know, again, it's got to have a little sauce to it, a little controversy, a little edge, a little big spending ask, whatever it is. You know, if someone comes in and says, we're going to release our report on where the next subway should be built in your city, yeah, editorial boards are going to be interested in that, because that is going to be a big issue going forward.
Now, when you started in ancient times, TV reporters looked really good, radio reporters sounded really good, print reporters were kind of rumpled and usually had ink stains on their clothing. Today, everybody's everything. You might get videotaped in the editorial board, you might have a columnist videotape you. You might have a radio reporter write something for that station's webpage. It's confusing about who's doing what, isn't it?
Everybody's doing everything is the short answer. And there are very few unmade beds out there. You know, very few reporters who just look like they rolled out of bed. Everybody has to do everything because everybody has a website. Everybody has all these avenues to do it. And, you know, there's a revenue side to it. The more people who read what you've written, the better for that media entity. And things like video, they can put pre-roll on and they can get paid for that. And if you write a good web piece, they can get a lot of page views and they can get paid for that. At the end of the day, the media is about money.